It starts with a man who awakens in the underbelly of a nameless, crime-filled town. He has no memories except for what he is experiencing now. Quickly, he is taken and forced to work on a ship filled with sailors who are closer to monsters than man. When an opportunity arises, he jumps the ship and swims for his freedom. His swimming leads him away from the ship, but to another prison entirely. But that's only part of the story. It starts with an author who writes under the name VM Straka. Straka was such a prolific author, he could topple entire governments simply by changing the opinion of the masses. Straka was an enigmatic author. Only one person knew who he really was, someone by the name of FX Calderia. Straka would write their books, each chapter in a different language, and FX would translate. Straka contacted FX and asked if they could meet for the first time in person at a hotel in Cuba, where Straka would hand over the manuscript for their final book. When FX got there, they found an empty hotel room, an open window, and a body lying face down in the alley 6 stories below. The Cuban police declared it a suicide. FX found a blood-stained manuscript hidden inside the room. They published it under Straka's name, with a preface explaining their role in the book's conception. Now, if all this is news to you, don't feel bad. The current news cycle is kind of crazy, and this is the sort of story that flies under a lot of people's radars. But all of this is only part of the story. It starts with a girl named Jen. She's in her last semester of college, and like most, she has no idea what she wants to do with her life. One day, she finds a book with researcher's notes written in the margins, and reads the book in one sitting. Not really thinking too much of it, she writes down her responses, refuting the notes left by the researcher, and she returns the book. The researcher, named Eric, picks up the book and sees these notes. They are interesting, and pose a few questions he himself hadn't thought of, and so somewhat jokingly he writes his rebuttals to her arguments, and then she writes her response to his rebuttals, and then he responds to her response, and slowly but surely a relationship is formed around a book with the strangest of authors. And that is the final part of our story. See, there's only one problem. It's because none of it ever happened. There's no amnesiac, VM Straka is not a real person, Jen and Eric have never met because they don't exist. Now, I bet you're understandably confused. So as the story goes, JJ Abrams came across a book at a bus stop, simply asking whoever found it to read it and leave it somewhere for someone else to read. After that, Abrams contacted Doug Durst and told him he had an idea for a story within a story. Inspired by books asking about the true authorship of Shakespeare's works, Durst envisioned a story not just about itself, but about the world it existed in. Now, this is a comprehensive list of all the books I've read in the past 4 years. I know, it's not a lot, and I definitely should read more, but it's hard enough for a book to strike my interest, and even harder for it to keep my attention. But something about this book caught my eye, and that was no accident. See, Durst wanted to create something that felt like it had been used right out of the box. The book has been yellowed, certain pages have dog ears and have been ripped. But most interestingly are the correspondence between Jen and Eric. You've no doubt noticed the writings in the margins of the book. These are little notes and conversations that Jen and Eric have written to each other as they themselves have read through the same book that you're reading. So as you go about reading the story of the amnesiac man, you also get to see this relationship between Jen and Eric come to life. And it's great. They have inside jokes and references to their earlier conversations, along with really thought-provoking commentary on the subject of the book, and interesting guesses as to the true identity of VM Straka. And they sometimes leave each other physical objects like postcards, letters, and newspaper clippings tucked between certain pages. And quick side note, these things are really super rad. Like, I know they're fake, but holding them in my hand, there's just something I can't put my finger on that makes them feel like they were handwritten. And that's the thing about this book that's kind of crazy. See, when you read a work of fiction, there's an understanding that what you're reading isn't real, but you will suspend your disbelief long enough to get some enjoyment out of the story. But there was more than one moment my first time reading through this book where I had to stop and start Googling things just to make sure what I was reading wasn't real. Because the way Jen and Eric talk to each other is so confident and believable, it makes you second guess yourself even as you're reading it, and even as you know it's not true. And I've never come across a mystery so enthralling that it could do that to me. And yes, I did say my first time through. I've read this book probably about 3 times now, and that's saying something because it takes a lot to get me to read a book once, let alone 3 different times. See, this is the kind of book that after you read it once, you're only left with more questions. And that's the sort of thing I hate in a book usually. Every other time I've come across something like this, reading it again has felt like a chore. But after finishing this book, I wanted to go back and finish reading because it felt like now that I have all these clues, I can finally put together this mystery. And look, I've started gushing and I'm going off script, which usually means it's time to wrap up a video, so let's suffice it to say, if you're a fan of books, or a fan of novelty, or you like mystery, or you just want some good storytelling, then do what I did. Go to your local library, find a copy of S by JJ Abrams and Doug Durst, and follow the monkey. Thank you for watching.
Hey, thanks for watching all the way to the end of my video. I really appreciate it. A couple things. If you like this video and want to see more, I've got all sorts of stuff on my channel about that. You can also subscribe, get up to date, stuff like that. I also have a Twitter, at Ian J. Slater, you see it on the screen there. If you want to keep up to date on the very stupid goings-ons of my life, or just get updates whenever I release a video, be sure to follow me there. I wanted to make a real quick correction and say that JJ Abrams found that initial book with the transcription, found that in an airplane terminal, not a bus stop. I don't know how I wrote that down wrong, but that's my bad. Thank you again very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, okay?